Hi, I'm Barry Ostrowski. At RWJ Barnabas Health, we believe that everyone needs to be informed about the important healthcare issues affecting their lives. That's why we're proud to support the important educational programming produced by the Caucus Educational Corporation.
State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Agnes Veris NJTV studio at 2 Gateway. Funding has been provided by RWJ Barnabas Health, the New Jersey Education Association, New Jersey Resources, the law firm of Gibbons PC, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, NJM, auto insurance, homeowners insurance, and more, with a focus on safety and financial stability. International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 825. And by the Northeast Regional Council of Carpenters. Promotional support provided by NJ Advance Media and by NJ Biz, all business, all New Jersey.
To the premiere edition of State of Affairs. I'm Steve Adubato, coming to you from the Agnes Veris NJTV studio in Newark, New Jersey. It is our honor to welcome Ambassador Phil Murphy, Democratic candidate for governor of the great state of New Jersey. Welcome to State of Affairs.
I'm honored to be here, Steve. Thanks for having me.
It is great to have you. Let me ask you, Ambassador, why would you choose to run for governor in the state of New Jersey? We have just a few challenges that we are dealing with.
We sure do. I could give you a couple of answers. One is I grew up in a culture of service in my family. My dad didn't get out of high school, but boy, we were into politics and he made sure we were. But more immediately, in the here and now, I think New Jersey is one of the most undermanaged entities I've ever seen in any walk of my life. There's so much we could be doing. Do we have crises? Do we have challenges? Absolutely. But with the right leadership and the right priorities, I think we can get back on our feet faster than any of us may think.
Let's do this. By the way, we're going to be interviewing virtually every major candidate on the Democratic and the Republican side. And once the candidates are chosen in June on the Democratic and Republican side, we'll focus on those two candidates. And by the way, finally, I want to thank our partners here at NJTV, where we're coming to you from, for making all of this possible. Ambassador, let me ask you this. The pension issue. We're doing this program right after the governor has delivered his State of the Budget address. I mean, he has talked about one of the largest pension contributions, I believe, $2.5 billion in the FY18 budget.
Yeah.
That is one of the largest pension contributions a governor has contributed in terms of this crisis, in terms of the New Jersey public employees retiring.
Yep.
That's a good thing, correct?
It's a step in the right direction, but it's way late and it's not enough. This is a crisis that's been building since the 1990s. And time again, we've had folks on one side of the table, the public sector unions, do what they've been asked to do, and the state has consistently reneged, not only under Governor Christie, but before as well. So it's
Democrats as well.
Both sides of the aisle. No one has kicked the can as far or as hard as this governor. It's a step in the right direction to make this payment, but it's not enough.
But let me ask you, Ambassador, in terms of total contribution.
Yeah.
And again, this is a cumulative situation, and it's hard to figure out. You know numbers better than most. You have a background in finance, if you will. What would you say the actual, I don't know whether to call it debt or the amount of money that actually is going to come due? Is it 40? Is it 50? Is it 60? Is it $80 billion in terms of public employees who will retire in New Jersey and the money's not going to be there?
Yeah, I'd look to the actuaries. I think it's $40-something billion. And as you mentioned, if you don't make the payments, it's a cumulative crisis. It gets out ahead of you. It's also one of the thorniest crises we'll ever face because in the aggregate, it's measured in tens of billions of dollars. I defy you to find someone who was changing bedpans for 25 or 30 years and look at that individual and ask whether she or he is living high off the hog, as they say. These folks are barely above the poverty line. So that dichotomy, that paradox, makes this as difficult as it is.
But, Ambassador, would you say that given the current situation and the fact that it's just not sustainable, that the current relationship between the state and public employees, that it's time to renegotiate that and look at that, particularly for new employees?
I wouldn't say that. I think the state must own up to its side of the bargain. I chaired the original commission
Let's
of this.
clarify. I'm sorry, clarify that. You mean put
the full amount of funding in. The amount the governor talked about is a step in the right direction. He mentioned dedicating lottery proceeds to the pension funds. I haven't studied it yet to know whether or not that makes sense, but I'm open-minded to that. We have to be creative. I think we throw money hand over fist to Wall Street, to hedge funds to manage our pension assets, and they give us back very mediocre, if not losing returns. There's a lot of money there. So we're going to have to look to a lot of different places to find the money that we need to find, but the state must own up to its end of the bargain.
Shift gears. Let's talk about school funding. This issue, we're not sure where it's going to play out. As the governor delivered his budget address, he said that, in fact, 100 days, the legislative leadership, and he will get together and talk about this. The school funding formula. There are many, many communities that are underfunded, that are not getting the dollars that they need outside of the urban communities, the so-called Abbott districts. What would you say to those communities right now who are just not getting the funding they need, and therefore their property taxes are way too high and not affordable for those citizens?
I'd say two things. Thank God the governor abandoned his so-called fairness formula, which is the ultimate us versus them proposal. So that's good news. The bad news is we have a school funding formula. It was blessed by our state Supreme Court. It's the only formula ever been blessed. It was a national model. I want to go back and fund that formula. This governor has underfunded it by over $8 billion. It'll be over $9 billion by the time he leaves. Let's fund the formula. And if we funded that formula, again, which was viewed to be one of the most innovative formulas in the country, if we fund that formula and we get our priorities straight again, I think we find our way clear to answering the question you've asked.
So you're convinced that the funding formula as it exists makes sense? Well, that it's a good plan.
It's a good plan. It needs to be updated. It was blessed in 2008, and it's never been funded. It asks the question, what I like about it, and what so many educators like about it, more importantly than what I think, is it's a bottoms-up formula. It doesn't just say District X will get Y dollars. It asks questions of, does this child have one, two, or no parents? Is English his or her first or not a spoken language? Do they have free or reduced lunch as a measure of poverty? Do they have special needs? Questions like that, and you build from the bottom up to an intelligent result. I like that a lot.
Ambassador, let me ask you this. By the way, I want to clarify, when I refer to you as ambassador, everyone may not know that you served to the as ambassador of?
Ambassador of the United States of America to the Federal Republic of Germany under Barack Obama.
We will talk a little bit about some of your interesting comments that you've made about that experience and your reference to the current President of the United States. Fascinating. We'll get to that in a minute.
You bet.
But the dollars, whether you're talking about the pension situation in terms of state dollars to go into the pension fund or state dollars for public schools, the state contribution, school funding, where would those dollars come from? And are you prepared to say, at this point in time, as we enter the spring of 2017, you know what? We should consider raising taxes on certain people in the state.
Yeah, I think everything's got to be on the table, literally everything. But again, I'd go back to the pension funds. One, I don't want to miss this point. We're throwing hundreds of millions of dollars at hedge funds and private equity funds.
What does that mean? Explain to folks.
Well, these funds, when they first started 30, 40 years ago, were exotic. They were unique. They had their own space, and they charged an arm and a leg. Typically 2% of the money you give me plus 20% of how much I earn. Those are big dollars. In the old days, you got what you paid for. In today's world, you don't. That's hundreds of millions of dollars that we're paying in fees and getting mediocre to poor returns. I wouldn't want to miss that. But I think we've got to turn over every stone, every spending item, every tax potential, big and small. I also think we have to get our priorities straight, honestly. It's a $35 billion budget. It's got a lot of zeros. The book is thick. Your eyes gloss over, but it screams out your priorities. Underfunding the school budget tells me that we're not caring about our kids. Giving out $7 to $8 billion in tax incentives to big corporations tells us the priorities of this administration. We got to look long and hard at that.
I just want to be clear before we leave this. You are open to the idea of raising taxes on the New Jerseyans who are at the higher end of the income bracket.
You have to be.
You have to be?
Absolutely. This is a state in economic crisis. Everything has to be on the table.
Respectfully, Ambassador, what about those who are in the Business and Industry Association and Chamber of Commerce and others who argue, wait a minute, what about if we lose those folks because they say, you know what, it's too expensive to be here.
Yeah.
I'm leaving. I'm going to Florida, wherever.
And we've lost some of them. First of all, I want to be the governor if I get there for those who fought and stayed. Secondly, we have to grow our economy. The big gorilla issue under the Christie administration is a broken economy, one that is neither growing nor fair. And so for the folks who are frustrated and feel like they get painted into a corner, who could blame them? The fact of the matter is we got to grow this state again. We used to be really good at that. We were Silicon Valley before there was a Silicon Valley. We owned the infrastructure economy. We've lost our edge in both. Let's get that back. I believe we can get it back, and I want to do that.
Word association. I say President Trump, you say?
I'm hugely disappointed. I'm very concerned.
But it's worse than that, because, Ambassador, you actually said, and I could get this wrong, you made some reference.
You bet.
He said, you understand a little bit. He said, not an expert on Germany, but you know more than the rest of us. You know a heck of a lot more than me.
Yeah.
He said, I know a little bit about the history of Germany. And as I listen to this president, I hear things, I hear rhetoric, and I have a sense that reminds me of a time in Germany where some scary things happened in the 1930s, if I'm not mistaken.
20s and 30s. I won't back off of that. I'm not trying to get people's hair on fire, but
well, it did.
We have to be on the edge of our seat. The comparison, at least in the early stages, and as I've also said, please God, I'm not suggesting it ends like it ended in Germany. But one thing you realize when you start discriminating against people based on whatever you want to fill in the blank, in this case, religious, based on how they worship their religion, and a Muslim ban in this case. When that train gets going down the tracks, the one lesson I know from Germany is it can get out ahead of you and you can never catch that train. So it's up to us to stand our ground. And an attack on one religion is an attack on all religions in this country, as an example.
Stay on the Trump administration, but it's connection back to New Jersey. Repeal and replace. We don't know where things are going to play out. State of Affairs will continue to monitor that, as well as our other colleagues in public television. What is your greatest concern about what the Congress and the president may or may not do as it relates to the Affordable Care Act and its impact on New Jerseyans?
Yeah, they talk about repeal and replace. As far as I can tell, it's a bumper sticker. It's not a policy. They can't themselves figure it out. If it were to be disassembled, the Affordable Care Act, it would be a fiscal and health care disaster for our state. And I hope our governor stands up, as many other governors have stood up and said, listen, Mr. President, Republicans in Congress, this is a potential American disaster. Look at the hundreds of thousands of people in our state who didn't have health care before, who have it now. Look at the millions who have pre-existing conditions who would no longer be able to get health care. Look at the tens of thousands of kids who are on their parents' plans till they're 26 years old. Women's access to
Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So they're now talking about Medicaid block grants. Here, you take this block of money, you figure out how to spend it.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with the federal government saying, states, you take this money and you administer it?
There's a lot wrong with it. They did it with welfare in the 1990s.
What happened?
And you betcha we're dragging and people are going without. The first thing that would happen is folks who need Medicaid the most wouldn't get it. You start to make decisions. Health care goes from being a right to being a privilege.
You worry about those people?
I worry about them a lot, man. I worry about them a lot. This is an incredibly unfair state, and right now I fear that it's an unfair country under this president.
Ambassador, last question. I ask a lot of leaders in this position, the number one leadership lesson that you have learned and how it could help inform the kind of governor you'd be. I know it's a trick question. Number one lesson in leadership we've learned, how it would impact you as governor. Go.
If you have a crisis, get out ahead of it. I had a series of crises that I had to deal with as the U.S. ambassador in Germany. If you allow a crisis to drag you along, it invariably gets bigger and worse. You get behind it, you have fewer options. As painful as it is, get out ahead of it. So as an example, in this state, we have an economic crisis. Let's be frank with each other. Let's talk clearly about it. Let's have everyone understand where we are and where we could go.
Ambassador Phil Murphy, I want to thank you for joining us on
Honored to be here,
the
Steve.
premier edition of State of Affairs. And I also want to say to folks who are following us on Twitter and on Facebook that many of your questions that you've been submitting to us, you can see us online right there. We're continuing the conversation. So many of those questions have informed this interview with Ambassador Murphy, as well as the other interviews that we'll also be having with other candidates for governor. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, sir.
Stay with us. State of Affairs. We'll be right back right after this. New Jersey voters will soon decide who will be New Jersey's next governor after Chris Christie. Now, my job is to ask the candidates the tough questions that you want answered. So follow me on Twitter at Steve Adubato and post the #1 question that you want me to ask New Jersey's next governor. State of Affairs welcomes our good friend Matt Hale, Associate Professor, Department of Political Science and Public Affairs at Seton Hall University, and back here in the studio at NJTV, Max Pizarro, editor of InsiderNJ.com. This is a new site.
Yes, it is.
Which is all about what?
It's all about New Jersey politics, Steve.
Good to have you guys on the premiere edition of State of Affairs. You're actually in the other room listening to Ambassador Murphy, one of many candidates who will be running for governor, talking to us. Biggest takeaway for you from that discussion?
I think that Phil Murphy has the confidence of a front runner right now, Steve. He's in a very good spot, and so he is just in a very prime position to win the Democratic primary. He seems at ease with himself.
And on the substance of the issues that, as I said before during the break, that we really try to focus on the issues, what does it say in terms of where his focus is, Matt?
Well, I think Murphy's made his case right now is that he's focused on the middle class. He's focused on the people who seem to be struggling in New Jersey, and so he's going to do a lot of things that sort of appeal to those folks. That could mean things like he may try and raise taxes on the rich so they can help pay for more things for the middle class. I'm not sure he's quite ready to say that yet, but I think that might be where he's headed.
You know, because we try to be very issue-oriented, I'm curious about that. If we're trying to get a sense of where most voters are in terms of what they care about and how they'll make a decision about who will succeed Chris Christie as governor, taking over in 2018, but getting elected in November 2017. Max, let me ask you, top 3 issues.
I think public safety for many people. I think property taxes.
Define public safety.
Well, I think people want to be able to walk out their front door onto the street and not worry about violence. And I think we're living in very volatile times, certainly in many of our urban areas. Children going to school have grave worries. I think that that public safety issue in conjunction with property taxes for so many people, and the two issues are related in more ways than one. I think that certainly schools account for 60%, I think, of most people's property taxes, and our property taxes are exorbitant.
So the school, sorry for interrupting, Max.
Certainly.
This school funding issue is huge?
It's huge. It's huge. And the governor talked yesterday about trying to reform it over the next 100 days with the Democratic legislature. And Steve, you asked me for a third issue. I would say transportation in New Jersey. I think transportation, I do. I think it's a huge issue. I think people are spending more and more time in their cars. I think we have more cars than the roads can contain. And I think that New Jersey it's always been a transit state. It's always been a transportation state. And I think that we're in a very hard time there as well. I would name those 3 issues.
Matt, let me ask you, if in fact Max is right, how is it that elected officials, how is it that people who are running for governor talk about those issues in a compelling way to engage voters to say, that's it, that's where I want to go? How do you do that?
So, you know, I think those issues are certainly the ones that people care about. I think that the way you connect it to that, I'd also add education. I think that a lot of people in the state are really interested in making sure that we have a really great education system.
For their own kids.
For their own kids, right? They're less interested in other kids. They want to make sure
I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, no, you're right. Absolutely. Everybody wants their own kid. But, you know, I think that the transportation issue you connect by saying we got to get people to Philadelphia and we got to get people to New York, because that's a fundamental part of who we are in New Jersey, is we got to get people moving up and down the state.
But Matt, stay on that, because here's the contradiction that I see. We talk about the state of affairs of transportation. People say, I want to have a strong transportation system. I don't want to have all these potholes. I want to have bridges that work. I want to have things be safe. And we know what happened when people were asked about the gas tax. Will you spend a few more cents on a gas tax? They said, absolutely not. So isn't there a disconnect? Well, and by the way, the gas tax to pay for all those things. What am I missing?
So I think the thing that people get frustrated at is they feel like we're giving all this money and we're not getting the best that we possibly can, right? We're already giving and we're not getting this fantastic.
So let's not trust, sorry for interrupting, let's not trust any of the politicians, as Trump says. Let's drain the swamp. But then what would government do then?
Well, I think one of the things that any candidate in the next election has to focus on is that we have to make sure that New Jersey is the state that delivers the services that we all want. We deliver transportation. And so there's got to be sort of this accounting of where that money goes. There's got to be this transparency of where that money goes. And I think that's a really great way of connecting, particularly transportation, but also I think education directly to voters. This is where your money's going. This is how we're spending it. And we're doing a good job at that.
I say Trump. You say? Come on, Max. Sorry. See, you didn't expect that one. I say Trump, you say.
I'd say that he's rather unconventional, Steve, in the way he's approaching his office.
Let's talk about Trump and his connection with the American voter, A, and B, his potential impact on the citizens of New Jersey, because that's what we're most concerned about.
Sure. I would say that certainly Trump, when he won last year, connected to a populist fervor. And as we examine this gubernatorial election in 2017, we're, first of all, recognizing that New Jersey is a machine state. So we have...
What do you mean?
We have party organizations that are primarily concerned with giving candidates the line to run statewide. And typically those candidates are in a prime position. For example, Phil Murphy has the line in most important Democratic counties, if not all. So we would believe that he, with that establishment support, can win. But what I would say, Steve, when you invoke Trump, is we have to consider what is now a very anti-establishment mood out there. And New Jersey is in a bubble in many ways because we are such an established entity as an East Coast. We're the enemy of many of these populist.
I thought we in the media were the enemy. I'm sorry.
Sorry, that's true. Yeah, I suppose that the two can conflate.
Okay, go back to the enemy issue.
Well, I would say that looking at this election and considering this election in light of Donald Trump and how he
You mean the
rose to
gubernatorial
power,
election?
Yeah, I think that we have to pay attention to that populist mood out there.
You think it's out there?
I think it is.
How could it? How do you? By the way, if Max is right, how could it potentially impact this gubernatorial race?
Well, see, I think that New Jersey doesn't follow that populist mood. I don't think. I think New Jersey is frustrated and angry at Chris Christie right now. I think they're frustrated and angry that he seems to have abandoned the state, and they want someone who's going to take care of New Jersey. But I don't get the sense that people in New Jersey are jumping on a Trump bandwagon, or candidates that are saying I'm Trump light or I'm Trump like are going to be particularly supported. I think people want someone who's going to really focus on New Jersey, but not with the sort of rhetoric that Trump does.
Real quick, on this thing about Chris Christie at the end of his term, is it fair to say that most governors at the end of a second term, it is very hard to maintain a level of popularity?
Absolutely. Certainly.
And so therefore, for Chris Christie, if you were to say what his legacy has been, how would you describe it?
I think, Steve, that he had a very, very fine first term. I think that his legacy is as a first-term governor, he was extremely successful. His second term appeared to be mired in scandal and his own ambitions for the presidency, and it got away from him.
Yeah, no, I'd certainly say that Chris Christie had, one of the best first-term governors in a long time in any state. I think it was a complete disaster in the second term, and I think he's gone nowhere.
But let me just say this: as we're doing this program in March 2017, opportunity to make a difference in the final months of this administration.
Well, I think one of the things we saw in the budget speech last night is Chris Christie sort of going back to the first term and saying, I want to reach across the aisle, particularly on school funding. He said, I'm going to go and, we have 100 days. We're going to try and make this happen. But he recognized that it had to be partisan, it had to be bipartisan.
But that's a real issue, and it's got to be resolved, and the Democrats have a responsibility, do they not, Max?
Sure.
They can't just say, wait a minute, it's your problem because you're the governor.
Right. That's true, Steve. But what's interesting
Or we'll wait
here
for the
is,
next governor.
Right. I think that we have a Democratic Party establishment, and I think I heard Phil Murphy say this today, even
in our interview here.
Right. Yeah. They don't want to reform the school funding formula. They don't want to change.
But does it need to? Sorry for interrupting, Max.
Certainly.
Max, doesn't it need to be reformed because there's so many communities that are getting underfunded, and therefore suburban communities,
right,
and their property taxes are too high. That doesn't mean that urban communities that were in the Abbott School situation in terms of the courts and what they said, I don't want to get into a long-winded thing, that we have to protect them, but these other communities are suffering, no?
Steve, I heard Speaker Prado yesterday say that he wants it tweaked. He doesn't want it overhauled. Christie wants it overhauled.
Well, those are words. What, tweaked, overhauled, some changes need to be made or no?
Sure, changes need to be made, absolutely. But it's a
matter of, I'm going to let you finish.
It's a matter of how far you're going to go. Christie wants to overhaul the system. He wants a per-pupil spending formula. Democrats don't want that. They want their power bases protected in those urban areas.
Respectfully, that's about their power bases. The question is, what is best for most citizens of the state? Go ahead.
So one of the things that Christie was, one of the reasons why I think a lot of people at first look liked the Christing formula, the fairness formula, is that
School funding formula.
The funding formula is that it sort of gave everybody the exact same amount of money, and that seems to a lot of people who are paying too much in property taxes.
But it's more complex than that because some districts need more than others.
Absolutely, it's far more complex than that. But from a political standpoint, that can be helpful. I think the fact that he's willing to work with folks, or says he's willing to work for folks, might get something done.
Because we still have problems that have to be dealt with.
Absolutely.
Listen, guys, I want to thank you for joining us on our premiere edition of State of Affairs. Come back again.
Thanks.
You're a good
Absolutely.
team. That is it for this premiere edition of State of Affairs. Let's continue the conversation. So follow me on Twitter at Steve Adubato. See you next week on State of Affairs. Thank you, guys. This is good.
State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Agnes Veris NJTV studio at 2 Gateway. Funding has been provided by RWJ Barnabas Health, the New Jersey Education Association, New Jersey Resources, the law firm of Gibbons PC, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, NJM, International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 825, the Northeast Regional Council of Carpenters, and by these public-spirited organizations, individuals, and associations committed to informing New Jersey citizens about the important issues facing the Garden State, and by Employers Association of New Jersey.
As an educator, it's all about connections. You're not just in the classroom, you're part of the community. You meet these tiny kids every year, and you help them learn and grow. But you also get to know their families, and over the years, they become a part of your life, and you become a part of theirs. When you build those connections, you can accomplish some pretty amazing things. I'm Jackie Kruzik, and I'm proud to be a New Jersey educator.